Hello everyone, it's Paul back again with another Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown video. That's right, we finally have a title revealed in the new trailer that was released earlier today, at least from my perspective. By the time I get this edited and uploaded, it'll have likely been a couple days. But something that's interesting that we see from this trailer that we sort of already knew, but has been underlined a lot in the latest trailer here, is that this game focuses a lot on unmanned aerial vehicles, aka drones, and how they are claiming the roles that would be traditionally filled by manned aircraft. And I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, is that a realistic thing? Is that something that we might expect to see in our own future, not just in Strange Real? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit to give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm a student pilot. If you've read my channel description, you already know that. And I'm actually at college right now, and my exact major happens to be professional unmanned aerial systems. So basically, I happen to be very interested in this particular topic. I'm not trying to say I'm an expert. I'd like to emphasize that one more time, that I am a student, not an expert. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt. And even if I was an expert, remember that this is all future speculation, so no one really knows what the future is going to hold. So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, we're going to dive in a little here, and we're going to talk about, is this a relatively realistic portrayal of the future, or is this maybe a little bit far-fetched? So first of all, this isn't just a recent development. Drones aren't actually all that new. So they've been around a lot longer than you would think. So if we go back to World War II, the US Navy was developing an aircraft called the TDN-1, and this was a radio-controlled unmanned aerial vehicle. I've actually included a link in the description of this video and also in the cards, hopefully. And it will take you to a video that will showcase the TDN-1 for you. I don't want to include any clips from that video just for copyright reasons, but there you go. There's the link. And basically, the TDN-1 was a pretty revolutionary aircraft. This thing was a radio-controlled unmanned aerial vehicle, so it could be manipulated by an operator that could control it in flight from a distance of up to about 25 miles, and it also was sending a video feed back to the operator. So this was a super revolutionary aircraft. So even during like the 20s and 30s, there had actually been some experiments with radio-controlled aircraft. They were actually using them as target drones, essentially, so that way anti-aircraft gunners could kind of practice shooting at them. But this, the TDN-1, had a video feed back to the operator, which really was a revolutionary development. And it was very low resolution, and like I said, only had about a 25-mile range, but this is still a huge step towards what we would now think of as sort of a Predator or Reaper, combat drones, because this thing actually could carry bombs or torpedoes into battle. It could drop them remotely controlled, and typically the aircraft was operated from another aircraft, like I said, up to about 25 miles away. Usually it was an Avenger torpedo bomber, if you're familiar with that aircraft from the Second World War. But yeah, this aircraft actually did see extremely limited, but still did see use in World War II in the Pacific Theater towards the end of the war. Only a handful of missions, but it did technically see combat. So it's a pretty cool aircraft, and if you want to look into that more, I'd recommend it. I personally think it's kind of fascinating. But yeah, so that's the TDN-1, and that's really the first video/radio controlled combat aircraft in terms of unmanned systems. So then we move on a little bit to the 1960s, and we get to the QH-50 Dash. So the Dash was a helicopter UAV, and this was actually built to kind of supplement a problem that the Navy was facing at the time. So, we were involved in the Cold War, so we didn't really have a whole lot of encounters where we were actually trying to sink a Soviet submarine, but obviously we were always trying to dream up new ways of, if we did actually have to fight the Soviet Union, how would we go about it? How could we do it better? And we had this interesting dilemma, which was that a destroyer could detect a submarine usually up to 20 miles away, but torpedoes at the time only had about a 5-mile range. So this was kind of annoying because it's like, oh, I can see he's there, but I can't get him. I have to get like 75% closer before I can actually shoot at him. So they developed the Dash as kind of a supplement to this problem. So the Dash was a helicopter. It could take off from the destroyer. It was carrying a torpedo. It could fly out 15 miles. It could drop that torpedo. The torpedo would then actually be guided by the sonar of the destroyer and hopefully hit that submarine and take it out. And meanwhile, the Dash would return to the destroyer and land. So that was basically the idea with the Dash. So, and again, this is the 1960s now. So again, a lot earlier than most people would probably think of for militarized drone aircraft. So then we get into, of course, more modern drones where you have strategic reconnaissance, you have tactical real-time battlefield monitoring, and yes, we do use them to shoot missiles at bad guys. But what's interesting to talk about with all of these previous incarnations of unmanned aerial vehicles is these are augmentary roles. These are roles for aircraft that augment other aircraft. So like the TDN-1 that I mentioned, the first one I mentioned, that was designed as a way to essentially create a weapons platform that was expendable, because the idea was you could use it to attack targets that had significant amounts of anti-aircraft batteries around it, and you didn't want to risk pilots' lives to attack them. The Dash, like I said, it's also a supplemental aircraft, because if you think about it, the Dash is basically just a range extender. All it was designed to do, it's like a rocket's first stage. It's just supposed to get the torpedo the first, part of its journey, so that way it can go on the rest of its way and kill the submarine on its own. It's not really in and of itself a useful thing. It is an augmentary technology used to extend a pre-existing technology. But when we get into this Ace Combat 7 trailer, it's talking less and less about augmenting, at least what it seems like anyway, and more about replacement, where we see these just fully autonomous vehicles dogfighting with manned vehicles. Now, once we actually get into the game, we might see that they serve more of an augmenting role and less of a replacement role, but at least my initial impression of everything that we've seen so far, it seems like it's more about replacement. So, is this realistic? Could drones replace manned fighters? And the answer is sort of. So yeah, you definitely could build a drone that can pull 20 plus Gs, if you reinforced the structure of the aircraft properly. Could be way more maneuverable than anything that currently holds a human, because if you've got a human in it, you're risking squishing the pilot whenever you pull an extreme maneuver like that. So in that aspect of building a capable fighter, of course you can build a capable fighter without a person in it, but there are some drawbacks. So first of all, are they quite as adaptable? This is often a thing that's brought up with humans fighting computers. Are the computers as adaptable? Can the humans use their imagination to fight off the robots? And the answer is, kind of. We do see that robots are learning now. We are able to make learning AIs, but they're usually actually not quite as good at responding to new situations as people are, because usually an AI will want to run sort of multiple iterations of a situation before it can really figure out what it can do best in them, and humans can typically hit the ground running a little bit faster. So there is that, but of course in the future AI will just continue to get better and better, and we'll slowly lose that advantage. But then there's also some issues in terms of, how exactly are these drones being controlled? Are they autonomous or are they remotely controlled? It certainly seems like a lot of them are autonomous. For instance, we see in that trailer where the Arsenal bird, or whatever they're calling it now, is dropping a bunch of smaller UAVs, and we see that there's a whole swarm of them. It seems a little crazy to me that you'd have all those drone pilots operating each of those individual drones simultaneously, all in a bunker somewhere, where it just is like a giant office building is what it would look like, where there'd just be a bunch of guys sitting at computer screens flying all these drones. It's certainly possible, but it seems more likely that a lot of these systems would be autonomous. And now you start getting into some issues in terms of autonomy, like, how much responsibility do you want to give a drone? How do you want it to be able to make its own decision of, oh yeah, we need to shoot down this airplane, we need to kill this person? Like, do you want to give a drone that level of responsibility, or do you maybe have it set up where it is autonomous, it makes its own decisions, but it gives a feed back to a headquarters somewhere, and it's like asks a question to a human where it's like, hey, I think it would be a good idea to kill this person. Should I kill this person? And the person can go, yes, you should kill that person, or no, you shouldn't kill that person. And then the drone will go, okay, I won't, or I will do that. Exactly how does that command system work? Because as of right now, most people are not comfortable with the idea of giving an AI the ability to choose whether or not to kill a human being, or even, shoot down a plane, potentially. So really, that's kind of the key to all this. That's what it really boils down to. Do you give drones the responsibility to make their own decisions to kill human beings? And if the answer is yes, if you're fine with that, for whatever your reasoning might be, then arguably, yes, you could potentially, maybe not perfectly replace, but definitely offset the amount of human pilots that you need flying fighter jets. You could definitely have a significant amount of fighter aircraft that were unmanned. But realistically, I think what you might end up seeing, and just as just my theory, is you'd realistically probably end up seeing something that we do actually see hinted at in some of the gameplay we've seen. So we've seen in the little bit of VR gameplay what we saw released, there's these Erusian fighters and they're manned, and then later on there's UAVs. So clearly Erusia hasn't totally abandoned manned fighters. There are manned fighters still in addition to the UAVs. So what I think might be the most realistic expectation from something like this is a sort of combined squadron where you have manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft working together simultaneously, where you have sort of autonomously controlled fighters and human manned fighters. And I feel like that would actually be a pretty harmonious way for these things to work together, because essentially the humans could use the drones as like a really smart missile that shoots more missiles, if that makes any sense. Like, you could give the drone an order, be like, oh, we're going to be engaging the enemy, shoot down those 4 targets, or something like that. And then the drones would break off and they'd start dogfighting that enemy formation. And now you kind of have a responsibility chain of command still, because you still had a human give the order, like, engage those targets and shoot them down. The drones didn't make that decision for themselves. They can make their decisions in terms of how is the best way to go about doing that. They'll evaluate that on the fly. But in terms of making the actual kill decision, they don't have that responsibility. So really, that's kind of the way that I would foresee these kind of aircraft being used in the future if autonomous fighters were developed, or are developed, I should say, because it's really more a matter of time than a matter of if. So that's kind of my theory, is that really what we're going to see realistically is not going to really be replacement, but it's going to be continuing augmentation, where it's going to be human-controlled aircraft working together more and more with unmanned aircraft, and using sort of the strength and weaknesses of both of them together. So that's just my opinion, of course, guys. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think. I'd be more than interested to see what your opinions on the matter are. And of course, in Ace Combat 7 here, considering it's very fictional, it's very possible that we might just have a bunch of fully autonomous squadrons running around, making their own decisions, not caring about the morality, because it's all fiction. So yeah, there we go, guys. There's my thoughts on the matter. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you are having a good day, and I hope that you're just as excited as I am for Ace Combat 7. Thanks for watching.